Chapter 1. The Yoga of the West. 1. Very few students of Cultism know anything at all about Fountainhead, whence their tradition springs. Many of them do not even know there is a Western tradition. Scholarship is baffled by the intentional blinds and defense with which initiates both ancient and modern have rubbed themselves about, and concludes that few fragments of literature which have come down to us are medieval forgeries. They would be greatly surprised if they knew that these fragments, supplemented by the manuscripts that have never been allowed to pass out of their hands in the initiates, and completed by an oral tradition, are handed down in schools of initiations to this day, and are used as the basis of the practical work of the Yoga of the West. 2. The adepts of these races, whose evolutionary destiny is to conquer the physical plane, have evolved a yoga technique of their own, which is adapted to their special problems and particular needs. This technique is based upon the well-known but little understood Qabalah, the wisdom of Israel. 3. It may be asked, why is that the Western nation should go to the Hebrew culture for their mystical tradition? The answer to this question will be readily understood by those who are acquainted with the esoteric theory concerning races and subraces. Everything must have a source. Culture do not spring out of nothing. The seed-bearer of each new phase of culture must of necessity arise within the preceding culture. No one can deny that Judaism was the metric of the European spiritual culture when they recall the fact that Jesus and Paul were both Jews. No race except the Jewish race could possibly have served as stock upon which the new dispensation was to be grafted, because no other race was monotheistic. Pantheism and polytheism had had their day, and a new and more spiritual culture was due. The Christian races owe their religion to the Jewish culture as surely as the Buddhism race of the East owes theirs to the Hindu culture. 4. The mysticism of Israel supplies the foundation of modern Western occultism. It forms the theoretical basis upon which all ceremonial is developed. Its famous glyph, the Tree of Life, is the best meditation symbol we possess because it is the most comprehensive. 5. It is not my intention to write a historical study of the sources of the Qabalah, but rather to show the uses that are made of it by modern students of the mysteries. For although the roots of our system are in tradition, there is no reason why we should be hidebound by tradition. A technique that is being actually practiced is a growing thing, for the experience of each enriches it and becomes part of the common heritage. It is not necessarily incumbent upon us to do certain things or hold certain ideas, because the rabbis who lived before Christ had certain views. The world has moved on since those days, and we are under a new dispensation. But what was true in principle then will be true in principle now, and of value to us. The modern Kabbalist is the heir of the ancient Kabbalist, but he must reinterpret the doctrine and reformulate the method in the light of the present dispensation if the heritage he has received is to be of any practical value to him. 7. I do not claim that the modern Kabbalist teachings as I have learnt them are identical with those of the pre-Christian rabbis, but I claim that they are the legitimate descendants thereof and natural development therefrom. 8. The nearer the source, the purer the stream. In order to discover first principles, we must go to Fountainhead. But the river receives many tributaries in the course of its flow, and these need not necessarily be polluted. If we want to discover whether they are pure or not, we compare them with the pristine stream, and if they pass this test, they may well be permitted to mingle with the main body of water and swell their strength. So it is with the tradition that which is not antagonistic will be assimilated. We must always test the purity of a tradition by reference to the first principles, but we shall equally judge the vitality of a tradition by its power to assimilate. It is only that faith which remains uninfluenced by contemporary thought. 9. The original stream of hebraic mysticism has received many tributaries. We see its rise among the nomad star worshippers of Chaldea, where Abraham in his tent among his flocks hears the voice of God. But Abraham has a shadowy background in which vast forms move half-seen, the mysterious figure of a great priest-king, born without father, without mother, without descendant, having neither beginning of day nor end of life, administers to him the first Eucharistic feast of bread and wine after the battle with the king in the valley. The sinister kings of Edom who ruled Era. There was a king whose kingdom are unbalanced forth. 10. Generation by generation we trace the intercourse of the princes of Israel with the priest king of Egypt. Abraham and Jacob went thither. Joseph and Moses were intimately associated with the court of the royal depths. When we read of Solomon sending to Hiram, king of Tyre, for men and materials to aid the building of the temple, we know about the famous Tyre mysteries must have profoundly influenced the Hebrew esotericism. When we read of Daniel being educated in the palaces of Babylon, we know that wisdom of the Magi must have been accessible to Hebrew illuminati. This ancient mystical tradition of the Hebrews possesses three literatures: the books of the law and prophets, which are known to us as the Old Testament, the Talmud, or collection of learned commentaries thereon, and the Qabalah, or mystical interpretation thereof. Of these, three ancient rabbis said that the first is the body of the tradition, the second is a rational soul, and the third is immortal spirit. Ignorant men may with profit read the first, learned men study the second, but the wise meditate upon the third. It is a strange thing that Christian exegesis has never sought the keys to the Old Testament in the Qabalah. 12. In our Lord's day, there were two schools of religion sought in Palestine, the Pharisees and Sadducees, of whom we read so frequently in the Gospels, and the Essenes, who are never referred to. Esoteric tradition affirms that the boy Jesus, Ben Joseph, when his caliber was recognized by the learned doctor of the law, who heard him speak in the temple at the age of 12, was sent by them to the Essenian community near the Dead Sea to be trained in the mystical tradition of Israel, and that he remains there until he came to John to be baptized in the Jordan before commencing his mission at the age of 13. Be that as it may, the closing clause of the Lord's Prayer is pure Kabbalism. Malkut, the kingdom, Hod, the glory, Netzach, the power, form the basis triangle of the tree of life, basal triangle, with Yesod, the foundation, or receptacle of influence, as the central point. Whoever formulated that prayer knew his Qabalah. 13. Christianity had its esotericism in the Gnosis, which owed much to both Greek and Egyptian thought. In the system of Pythagoras, we see an adaptation of the Kabbalistic principles to the Greek mysticism. 14. The Esoteric, state-organized section of the Christian Church persecuted and stamped out of the Esoteric section, destroying every trace of its literature upon which it could lay hands in striving to eradicate the very memory of Gnosis from human history. It is recorded that the baths and bakehouse of Alexandria was fired for 6 months with the manuscript from the great library. Very little remains to us of our spiritual heritage in the ancient wisdom. Everything that was above ground was swept away, and it is only with the excavation of the ancient monuments the sand have swallowed that we are beginning to rediscover its fragments. 15. It was not until the 15th century, when the power of the Church was beginning to show signs of weakening, that men dared to commit to the paper the traditional wisdom of Israel. Scholars declare that Qabalah is medieval forgery because they cannot trace a succession of early manuscripts, but those who know the manner of working of esoteric fraternities know that a whole cosmogony and psychology can be conveyed in glyph, which means nothing to the uninitiated. These strange old charts could be handed on from generation to generation, their explanation being communicated verbally, and the true interpretation would never be lost. When in doubt as to the explanation of some abstruse point, reference would be made to the sacred glyph, and meditation thereon would unfold what generations of meditation had ensouled therein. It is well known to mystics that if a man meditates upon a symbol around which certain ideas have been associated by past meditation, he will obtain access to those ideas, even if the glyph has never been elucidated to him by those who have received the oral tradition by mouth to ear. 16th. The organized temporal force of the Church availed to drive all rivals from the fields and destroy their traces. We little know what seeds of the mystical tradition sprang up only to be cut down during the Dark Ages, but mysticism is inherent in the human race, and although the Church has destroyed all roots of tradition in her group soul, nevertheless, devout spirit with her fold rediscovered the technique of the soul's approach to God and developed a characteristic yoga of their own, closely akin to the Bhakti yoga of the East. The literature of Catholicism is rich in treatises on mystical theory which reveal practical acquaintance with the higher states of consciousness through a somewhat naive conception of the psychology thereof, thus revealing the poverty of a system which does not avail itself of the experience of tradition. 17. The Bhakti Yoga of the Catholic Church is only suitable for those whose temperament is naturally devotional and who find their readiest expression in laughing self-sacrifice. But it is not everybody who is of this type, and Christianity is unfortunate in not having any choice of systems to offer its aspirants. The East, being tolerant, is wise, and has developed various yoga methods, each of which is pursued by its adherent to the exclusion of the others, and yet none would deny that the other methods are also paths to God for those to whom they are suited. 18. In consequence of this deplorable limitation on the part of our theology, many Western aspirants take up Eastern methods, For those who are able to live in Eastern conditions and work under the immediate supervision of a guru, this may prove satisfactory, but it seldom gives good results when the various systems are pursued with no other guides than a book and under unmodified Western conditions. 19. It is for this reason that I will recommend to the white races the traditional Western system, which is admirably adapted to their psychic constitution. It gives immediate results, and if done under proper supervision, not only does it not disturb the mental or physical equipoise, as happens with regrettable frequency when unsuitable systems are used, but it produces a unique vitality. It is this particular vitality of the adepts which led to the tradition of the elixir of life. I have known a number of people in my time who might justly be considered adepts, and I have always been struck by that particular ageless vitality they all possess. 20. On the other hand, however, I can only endorse what all the gurus of the Eastern tradition have always averred, that any system of psycho-spiritual development can only be safely and adequately carried on under personal supervision of an experienced teacher. For this reason, although I shall give these pages in the principle of the mystical Qabalah, I do not consider it would be in anybody's interest to give the keys to its practice, even if by the terms of the obligation of my own initiation I were not forbidden to do so. But on the other hand, I do not consider it fair to the reader to introduce intentional blinds and misinformation. And to the best of my knowledge and belief, the information I give is accurate, and even if incomplete. 21st. The 32 mystical paths of the concealed glory are ways of life, and those who want to unravel their secrets must treat them. As I myself was trained, so can anybody be trained who is willing to undergo the discipline, and I will gladly indicate the way to any earnest seeker.